These are fancy, right? Really cool. So I come to you guys today with some stories about some things that we've been experimenting with in my team at MailChimp. And I want to tell you a little bit about something we've been struggling with. We, like you guys, do a lot of different research and planning to try to make smarter design. But we have been encountering a couple problems. One of which is, so we do all these tactical outputs, what I call tactical outputs, that are things like usability tests. We do interviews with users. We're talking to a lot of different customers coming in. We're getting tons of feedback coming in through our website. We look at a lot of analytics for mobile devices and for Google Analytics and so forth. These all help us solve small problems that we shave a second off of this workflow, make something a little bit simpler. Those are all tactical measures that we're using. Competitive analysis is another part of what we're doing. We're looking at the market. But what I found is with all of this stuff coming in, it's a bit of data overload where there's just so much information that we have to process. And I know from my perspective, there have been times where it's just far too much for my little brain to work through and find any meaning in that. And oftentimes when we're looking at all of this stuff that's coming in, we're doing research, we're looking at all this sort of ambient or passive data that's coming in through things like analytics, we're starting to lose insights in this past year. So people would do big usability tests, they would do dozens of tests, all kinds of interviews. We'd learn some stuff, we'd be smarter for a few weeks, and then that stuff would slowly degrade into the back of our mind, which was a problem. So all this data is coming in, and we were converting that to information, we were coding it and tagging it, trying to make that into knowledge. We'd make reports that say, here's how e-commerce customers do these things. Here's how people do X with these features. That helps us understand what to do next, how to improve those things. But what I noticed over the past few years as I've built this team and tried to make it better and more efficient is that rarely were we getting to the pinnacle of what I really wanted us to do, and that is become smarter, to become wiser, to change that knowledge, that temporary knowledge, into wisdom. Wisdom that tells us not just how do we solve this immediate problem, but how do we see broader? How do we see what's going on in the industry, with our competitors in the market, what's happening with our customers in all these different places around the world, and how do we find bigger trends instead of waiting for something big to happen and reacting to that? How do we get to the point where we're doing user experience design not in this tactical way, we're always fighting small battles? How do we bring all that stuff together and think about the war that we're trying to fight here, that we're trying to make something that's really great, re-envision the application in certain situations. We're actually going through that process right now with a huge redesign that's not just about design, it's about a different way that people work now that there are so many different devices at our fingertips all the time. How do we create strategy from this? How do we get smarter? So that's what we've been struggling with, and I can give you a specific example of a crisis, a personal crisis that I had. So my team was getting bigger, I had more people to keep track of. I had so much feedback coming in from customers, and it would fill up my inbox. I was getting so many emails, like hundreds and hundreds of emails every day with good ideas, like really valid, interesting ideas, but not always ideas of, let's go make that a ticket and let's go do that. Well, in theory, I'd like to do that, but when you have hundreds of good ideas coming in, which one is the one that you're going to do? Because there's only so many hours in the day. So I kind of got to inbox infinity, and my brain was blowing up of what to do with all of this stuff. And in addition, I had peers, I had colleagues in support and various places that were telling me, this is what we need to do to adjust things, to make things better. And I'd say, yeah, okay, yes, yes. To the point where I just was like shrinking into my seat of like, there's no way we're going to get all of this done. There's no way we can do all of this stuff. There's got to be something meaningful here. So it turns out that this guy, Merlin Mann, stopped by and was hanging out with us. he's sort of an email guy, right? He knows a lot about email, and I told him my problem, that I'm getting a ton of feedback. All of this information is coming in. I know about your methodologies for getting to inbox 0. What do I do with all this feedback? It's really useful. It's really good. And he gave me some sage advice. He said, burn it all down. Just chuck it out the window. It's too much for you to handle. And he could see that this was not just like, I'm having some struggles at work, but it was kind of like a bigger stress on me. And my gut told me that although that sounds like an easy solution now, I would be losing great value that I cannot reclaim. I couldn't get that back if I deleted all of that feedback, if I just stopped paying attention to that. There's something here. So instead, I did something different. I took all of those emails. I wrote a little Gmail script, so when an email comes in with a certain subject line, feedback, I knew what the subject line was from the feedback form on the website. When that comes in, I'd read it and I would star it. I'd say, yeah, that's a worthy idea. And I would actually have Gmail tag that worthy idea and then forward it on to a secret email address in Evernote. So those emails started adding up, and I would curate it. I was just skimming off the cream from the top of the milk to find these ideas in here that were actually really good and worth considering down the road. Next thing I know, I've got a pretty nice collection of feedback coming in, about 1,400 pieces of data. Not just any kind of data, but curated, good data. I hadn't gone through and tagged it or anything, but what's interesting is all this data that's coming in has an email address of the person that asked about that. So if I needed to at some point, I could follow up with that person and say, hey, could you tell me more about your use case and what you were trying to do here? So I sat on it. I sat on it for a couple months. And we started working on different projects. We were doing more interviews, traveling all over to talk with customers and listen to them and learn how their businesses work. And then I got an email from our CEO, Ben Chestnut, and he said, so we're working on this automation stuff. We're trying to really understand what people are doing. How do we improve that? But I think there's something else like with RSS to email and all these bloggers that are pissed off about like FeedBurner shutting down their API. Can you tell me some more about that? And I thought, okay, this is going to take me a long time to do a big study, go meet with a bunch of people, try to learn and compile that into a report and say, ta-da, here's what I found out, the way people think and what they're trying to do, and here's what we do. That takes time. You guys have probably done that. You know it takes a lot of time and energy. We didn't necessarily have that time. So instead, I busted out my little MacGyver box of feedback, and I did a quick search. Turns out, interesting patterns already present. So this is basically a database. It's just a database of feedback from customers that I was able to search. 30 seconds, I've got some patterns. I take that content, I start putting it into a spreadsheet, I start tagging it. Okay, I see patterns. Literally, I got that email on a Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock, and I had pretty good, clear strategy for what people were struggling with by 5 o'clock by the end of that day. Not only that, I had all the email addresses to go talk to specific people about what they were trying to do. So instead of recruiting to do interviews, usually we just cast a net on Twitter. Does anybody use RSS to email? Can you tell me what you're trying to do with your blog? And maybe we get a few people. We went from fishing with a net to spearfishing and pinpointing the exact right person to talk to. Really amazing. My reaction was, oh my God, that was really cool. I want to do more of that. How can I get more data in there? How can I learn more and maybe get smarter about what we're doing? Get more people involved. So I talked to Greg. Greg Bernstein is a researcher in my design research team, really sharp guy. And he's like, well, I know Evernote is coming out with a business account. That'll let a whole bunch of us collaborate and put lots of different things in there. Let's set up that account and start sharing this with more people in the team. So we pulled in our intern, Fernando, and we put him on a crazy task. He had just started as an intern. He read through 10,000 pieces of feedback that were account closing surveys. So when someone closes their MailChimp account, we give them the opportunity to tell us why. and they can categorize that and yell at us, tell us whatever they want. That's very useful information. You know, to find out when someone leaves you, why did they leave you, what can we do better? So Fernando read through 10,000 pieces of feedback, found really good stuff, and started passing that into Evernote as well. So we went from 1 notebook to 2. We had customer feedback, that's just general stuff from customers at any point in the life cycle of their account, to having 2, and we've got account closing surveys as well. Then I went and talked to Jen. Jen's also in my design research team. She does a lot of usability testing, and she interviews our customers as well. And she's got a wealth of data because she's been on my team the longest. She knows a lot about usability, has tons of data, and it was her information that I was specifically worried that we were losing, that was fading into the background. So I said, Jen, all that usability testing, all those reports and stuff where you summarized all those findings very eloquently, where are they? Well, they're up in Google Drive. Okay, great. Can you start passing those in? Just copy paste that stuff into a new notebook in Evernote so we have it in one place. Yeah, okay, so we add another notebook. We've got interviews and usability test findings. So we keep going, adding some more stuff there. And while we're doing this, again, not with an explicit thing to do other than we had this really cool experience, maybe we could do this again, maybe it will be useful, we're unsure. Another email from Ben comes in. You know, I keep seeing these weird pieces of feedback about people wanting to embed YouTube videos in their email. And normally I'd say, like, okay, that sounds a little bit weird because you can't actually embed video in an email. But I'm seeing it over and over again. There's got to be some meaning or reason for this. Can you tell me how big a trend this is? How many people actually want to do this? So again, we break out our MacGyver box of research and search in 30 seconds in Evernote. And we found out the answer is 11. It's not, yeah, sort of, we think it's going this way. The answer is 11. We've heard 11 times from customers that they wanted to embed video. That doesn't sound like a ton of people, but we see when that sort of represents like the tip of the iceberg, that if you get 11 pieces of feedback, you're starting to see a pattern. Many people will not report that problem. So it gives us an indication that maybe we should look into that a little bit closer. But this was another OMG moment for us, where the light bulb's going off, that whereas before we would have to like dig and search and try to find things, we were instantly able to quantify and find out that this is something substantial we should consider. So from all of this, we started to think, well, what if we could open up data in a broader way? Because we sit on a mountain of data. We have millions of customers. We send billions and billions of emails. There's tons of data around that stuff. What could we learn to try to be smarter about our design? So I talked to this guy. This is John Foreman. He's got a PhD in math from MIT. He's an uber nerd. He knows a lot about data and statistical analysis, all the stuff that me, as the guy that went to painting school, I don't have any clue about that stuff. So he helped enlighten me about this, gave me some books that made for good bedtime reading, and helped us start to consider different types of data that we could be looking at. He also mentioned maybe we should be talking to the delivery department, the people that handle email delivery. They see tons of data as well. So I talked to Cass, I talked to Michael, then I talked to Brad, who has a really interesting job. He's in support, and so he sees tons of patterns. But Brad's a really smart guy, and it turns out he's got a really cool data analytics background, and he was working in support, so he became a data analyst to look at transcripts and start to slice and dice that and find patterns. What are the most common words used in email support tickets or in chats? How can we normalize that and learn something from that to be proactive? So he helped. Allison, who looks at analytics for the marketing site, and then started adding new logging into the app so we could learn more about the behaviors that were happening in the app. Amanda monitors Facebook and Twitter, and she looks at our blog comments too, so she sees patterns in different ways where we're talking to customers and listening. And then Eric, who leads the engineering team that's working on MailChimp, he sits on a mountain of data too because he's building all of these databases that the application is passing through. He can tell you how many people are using a particular feature and how often a particular type of pathway is used. So we had analytics, Google Analytics, and Flurry Analytics from our mobile apps. It turns out in Google Analytics, you can set up sort of a cron job, a scripted job, and say, every Monday morning at 7 a.m., send me a PDF report about every mobile device that's being used in MailChimp. The conversion rate from sign up to sending the first campaign, so we can see that funnel. How long does it take? So sending that PDF, guess where we're sending it? Sending it to Evernote, because it's just going to send an email. And Evernote is just accepting all these emails. So analytics start streaming into our Evernote account. We streamed in all these account closing surveys, too. I still read every single account closing survey, why someone left MailChimp. I read every single one. I forward the ones that we can learn from into Evernote. All the blog comments that are salient and relevant that can really help us learn, we also curate that and put that in there. We look at competitors. You can use Google Alerts. Google Alerts sends an email with information about what's happening in the competitive landscape in your market. So you can forward that into MailChimp, into Evernote as well. Then we started to look at delivery stats too, like how often people are sending. What are the sending trends, like times of day and so forth. That can help us understand what's going on in their life. When are they under deadline? Industry research. So we're doing general research. I spent most of December and January researching mobile trends, what's happening in mobile, learning a lot about how there's a big shift from just sitting in front of your desk to all these different devices and how that extends the experience into different spaces. And that also changes the way that we work together. Every time we do a release, someone sends out an email that just sums up everything we've just done in that release, and it just goes to everyone in the company. So we CC that into Evernote, so we've got a history of everything we've ever changed as well. That helps us put into context certain feedback we might find. What changed the previous month that might have caused this reaction? And support data, tons of data about support trends, aggregate data. What are the most popular knowledge base articles? That's going to be an indicator of where you have problems that you need to consider. Survey data. We did a big survey this year, and we collected about 12,000 responses that had user IDs so we can know how to get in touch with someone, how old their account is, that sort of thing. We took all of that aggregate data about, they report their industry and the size of the company and stuff, and we put those, you can just screenshot them from SurveyMonkey and paste them into a note in Evernote, and Evernote does OCR. It's just character recognition. So anything that's in a screenshot is searchable. You can still find that. I'll show you that in a second. And tweets as well, any tweets that are helpful. All that stuff, tons of disparate data flooding into one place. Why Evernote? Because Evernote was easy. It was inexpensive for us to use. And it had an easy way to get all of this stuff in. That email is this API. So we dump it all in there. And then when you do a search, you're searching very broad trends in the industry, clear down to individual interviews with users or a small piece of feedback or something that's happening in support. Email's the API. And that's great because if you want a lot of people to share their data, to open it up and get interested, it's got to be easy for them to get their stuff into that database. So after we did all of that stuff, our 3 little notebooks grew and grew and grew. And we'd do research projects, and we'd break out stuff from account closing surveys. We'd tag certain things we're looking for. People that are looking at their lists in a people-centric way. Well, I want to learn about this person. So we'd tag lots of things across different notebooks. And then from the tagging interface, we could just view all of that stuff and move it, copy it over into a new notebook where we could slice and dice that and start to build strategies from that. That was a huge win in terms of the power of research, of what we could do, but it was a much bigger win because it changed our company. And I know that sounds like hyperbole to stand on stage and say, this thing we did with a notebook changed our company. But I kid you not, guys. I mean, this stuff started happening. These are people that didn't talk to each other that often. They would see each other at coffee in the morning at the espresso machine. Now they're having lunch all the time and talking about data. They're talking about what they found, what they have, and what they can share. We have a data nerd lunch every other week on Wednesdays, and all these people get together, and we talk, and we shoot the breeze. We get to know each other, and we know who has what information. So when we're doing research, we're trying to figure something out, we know who to ask. The other thing that's really fascinating to me is that this cultural change made everybody ask more questions and know which questions were okay to ask. That you could ask this question, and you could actually find an answer, because that sounded like far too complicated to solve, but now it's a whole lot easier to find. So here's how this works. Here are some basic mechanics of how we do this. We route the data with email, as I mentioned, but you can be more specific as you route it in with an email. So you can adjust the subject line to add @ and then a notebook name. So when we're forwarding something in from Google Analytics, Google Analytics lets you set the subject line for that report, and we just add @analytics. So when that email comes into our Evernote account, it automatically funnels it into the right place. And then as I'm looking at customer feedback emails, as I'm looking at any sort of account closing surveys, that type of stuff, you can tag, when you're forwarding something in via email, you add into the subject line a hashtag. Hashtag some feature, hashtag RSS to email, etc. So you're coding it as you're reading it and learning from it. So we ended up with an amazing set of coded data. And we had this sort of flash of, we could do something more with this, because we've got all these interviews. And when we talk to those people in interviews, we know the persona that they are, because we've already met with a ton of customers, identified our personas. We made some posters of all of our personas that we have hanging up on our walls in the design studio. So these are the people that we know are common users. And we tag them. We tag that data with, that's the ADA persona. So now it's related to the poster of the person in the design studio. That's the person we're designing for. Here is data that tells us more about ADA. So if I want to go find out, what does ADA want to do with RSS to email, I could do that. I click on that tag, and then I do a sub-search within that. So I can really get down to a granular level. It's pretty amazing power. It's very, very interesting. It blew my mind. I talked to the folks at Evernote to see if they knew that their product would do this with the business account. And they're like, holy shit, I didn't know you could do that. So they came and they studied us to see how that works. So I'm gonna just give you a couple quick demonstrations. When I was doing the study on mobile, I wanted to understand how people were using Android devices in our ecosystem and all of our different platforms. So I went to Evernote and I did a quick search across all notes. I searched for Android, and here's what came up. So I found some interviews. Here's a guy that I met in San Francisco at Wolfgang's Vault. And there's a picture of him there, and I've got all kinds of information. I've got transcripts from the interview that I had made through Casting Words, but you can do that through Mechanical Turk, a lot cheaper. I put all of that transcript in there so it's searchable. I can see we had a conversation about his Android device that was sitting on the desk. I know that he's this particular type of persona, and he uses an Android device, as does this user that I talked to, Michael Oliveri. He does as well. Look further, and I see articles. In fact, look at there. There's notes from one of Luke's workshops, Luke Wroblewski's workshops, about mobile devices, where he talks about Android trends in the industry. There's notes that we find, articles from GigaOM or whatever. Evernote's got a little web clipper, so if we see something that's relevant, you click a button in your browser, it funnels it into Evernote really quick. You don't have to copy and paste anything. So we're seeing broader industry trends there as well. Up there is notes from, looks like some sort of research that someone had done. This is a tweet where a customer is talking about or complaining about Android, so I can get some context. And because it's a tweet, I've got the ability to get in touch with that person directly. I see account closing information. There's a person that mentioned Android when they closed their account. And I see aggregate data from our surveys. See, I just screenshotted these and put these charts in here. And that was searchable because of the OCR, the character recognition. And then lastly, there's in release 8.0, we did something different with Android, so I've got context. So what I get is very broad and very detailed information that helps me understand what's going on there. Here's another search where I'm just searching for a feature in MailChimp to see how people are using that. And I search for autoresponders. I see all these pieces of feedback. I see data. There's another piece of data, people who use autoresponders. That came from the aggregate data from our engineer that works on MailChimp. I can see some of our competitors and what they're doing with it. This is interesting. This is feedback from a golden monkey from the TED conference. They were complaining about autoresponders and had some ideas about it. So that's tagged as golden monkey. That's what we call special customers and people who use autoresponders. So really fascinating stuff. But yet another interesting thing that I did not anticipate. This guy's not a researcher. This guy is a mobile designer. He works in Mobile Lab, and I gave him access to the account, and he started searching. He was just curious because he was designing a new view for the iOS app to show reports, and he was wondering, what's the hierarchy here? What's the most important piece of information that people look at the most? Searched. You see just over his left shoulder, there's a printout on the wall. He printed that out from an Evernote search, which came from one of our surveys that was locked over in SurveyMonkey, screenshotted, and put into Evernote. He found that and created this. He calls it his eye chart. He did a massive print that shows the hierarchy of information that people care about the most in reports when they do reports. And that comes from research of about 12,000 people that we sampled. So that's really powerful. He's not a researcher. He went and found the data that he needed to make smarter decisions about his design. So you find this information, but the thing that I've found is that if you're just making big reports, they're not very compelling. They don't change what's happening in the company. You really need to figure out a way to tell a story about that so other people can understand that and see the vision for what's happening next. So we started to do this bi-weekly newsletter. Yeah, we're an email company. It gives us the chance to use our own product and learn what's not right about it by trying it ourselves. So we send out an email that's internal to our company just called MailChimp Insights. We go into Evernote every other week. Usually on Wednesday, we do searches or we find stuff that we think is interesting. As we go along, we tag it Insights so we know what we want to add in the newsletter. And we just share some information. Like, these are the top 10 sending industries. Nonprofits are the #1 for us. Okay, that's interesting. 55% of campaigns sent right now are with our new editor. That's interesting to see a change there. So, again, with my big mobile study, it was 24 pages. I learned a lot, and I shared a lot, and I talked to people a lot. But I found that I needed to be smarter about how I communicated about that. So I went to talk to this guy. This is Josh. Josh does video, and he does a really good job with video. He's a creative thinker, really smart guy. And he helped me make a video. This is a screenshot from the video that was the product of the future. This is the product we're making. This is the product that we want to make to go forward. And it was about 1 minute and 30 seconds. It was a little online video that I could copy the URL, IM it to the CEO and say, all that research I've been doing, here's where we need to go. It doesn't show interfaces. It shows lifestyles. It shows this is the way people live. This is the way they work. 24 hours is not enough time to get your work done. So this user is on her couch in her living room, still working on her email campaign late at night. And that carries through, and you see multiple devices, lots of people collaborating. What's amazing about that little video is that we made that video in February, and we came out with all of these new collaboration features in about a month and a half. And now we're finishing up a big redesign that makes the whole app responsive, which makes the other half of what's shown in this video possible. So from that small story, we've totally rethought our entire platform. It's amiable, and I think that's a really important thing. We do a lot of research, we generate a lot of information, we get smarter, and we hopefully become wise about what's happening. But making it a quick share helps a lot of people get on board faster. And it makes it memorable. They remember, what is my goal here? What am I trying to do? We're all marching in the same direction, even though we have a lot of people. So I want to just wrap up here with the principles that I've discovered of big data UX, what I'm calling big data UX. I'm not sure if it's the right term for it yet, but the principles that guided us as we decided this, because we tried a lot of things before. We tried these crazy wikis that sucked. They had to be behind these crazy firewalls and so forth. They were not usable, and so therefore no one used them. So for us, we needed whatever thing we were going to use. This is before we knew we were going to use Evernote. It needs to be easy in, easy out. You've got this data, you've got this research. Get it into this common repository quickly, and you should be able to get that out very quickly. It should come out, and you should be able to search and find that easily. All this thing where we've been talking about mobile design and trying to make our content work for mobile, make our interactive experiences work for mobile. Why can't that work for research? I don't just research at my desk when I'm doing business. I research when I'm standing in the line at the shopping market, to check out, or I'm at the post office or something. I can watch videos of user tests on Vimeo from my phone. I can hop into Evernote and see when new stuff has been synced from my team that's back in the States right now. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere that I am, anytime and anywhere. And it should be data for everyone and everyone's data. And that's a really great thing to give you the breadth of understanding, to see lots of different things from different perspectives. But it also gives your team the feeling that they're part of something bigger. They're part of an initiative. Every time we send out that insights email, it always concludes, do you want access to all this? Please come. Come talk to me. I'm going to give you access, and you can start sharing data or just lurking and watching all of this stuff. Because even if you have passive learning happening in your company, it's better. So I call this big data. It might be a misnomer. I'm not sure. I'm still trying to figure this out. But I call it big data not because it's about petabytes of information. It's not a ton of data. It's definitely megabytes and probably gigabytes, but it's not petabytes. But it's a lot of different types of data. And from that, the promise of big data is patterns, that there are patterns that will emerge from lots of different places, lots of different silos. Patterns that we can then quantify and learn from. It's all these different silos in your organization, all these different teams, all these different disconnected pieces of data types that should have the walls busted down to be open. Open data doesn't just make you a smarter researcher, doesn't just make you a smarter designer, it makes you a smarter team. So I'm not suggesting a replacement for the stuff that you're already doing in your organization, all the different research. I'm suggesting this might be an interesting way to turn those tactical outputs that you're doing. I'm fighting this battle, this one battle here, to something bigger. Can I create a strategy? Shouldn't user experience really be about creating strategies for the company? Not for, I'm going to make this little thing work better. Great, I love that. That gets me up in the morning. But if we're really doing good work, hopefully we're changing the way that our companies think. We should be able to make smarter companies with all of the research that we're doing. That's it, guys. Thanks.